Hello and welcome back to your Hobby Connection. I'm so glad you're able to join us once again. We're continuing on with part 3 of our Lionel 2024 catalog series, the good, the bad, and the Streamlined. To that end, we're going to go ahead and talk about the beautiful Royal Blue line. The Royal Blue line was done by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The number 1315 is based on the 460 10-wheeler locomotive that Lionel's presenting. Now that locomotive did run as a 10-wheeler in 1896. So not this particular locomotive, it would have been a different size, a different look. But it's based on the F12E from the New York Central, and that's why it looks the way it does. And that's, again, the 1912 version of the locomotive. So the 1896 is when this railroad started to do this, and it was actually done in July 31st of 1890 when we had the Royal Blue line set in operation. It was started by the B&O for the passenger service from New York to Washington, D.C. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we'll see these cars all have different crests on their cars. Why is that? Well, it was called the Royal Blue Line, and it serviced from 1890 to 1917. It was discontinued when the United States entered World War I, primarily because the U.S. took over the railroads with the Railroad Act. They said, hey, we're taking the railroads, and because of the war and the royal family fell out of favor, and the royals in general fell out of favor of the United States, they decided to not only discontinue the service, but when they brought it back, they called it things like the National Limited and other things like that. So one of the things that was funny is that it ran on the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad east of Philly, and also used the Central Railroad of New Jersey. So that's why we have 3 different sets of car packages here. So all of these numbers don't necessarily exist as far as the passengers themselves, but if you'll notice, it says New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington. It didn't have the B&O railroad number or name, and the only way they could denote who owned what was based on the symbol on the center of the car. Why is that? Because of the 28 cars that were made, 3 railroads, the B&O, the Reading, and the Central New Jersey Railroad, all provided passenger cars. So they denoted them by saying, hey, the cars with this symbol, or that symbol, or this other symbol, are those railroads' cars. So it was originally called the Royal Blue, and the Royal Blue line came in later on. Once it got reestablished after World War I, it ended in 1958, and came back as the Royal Blue Limited in 1935. And the peak of the line, it had 6 runs a day from 1890 to the end of World War I. To the beginning of World War I, I'm sorry. It ran 224.6 miles in 4.25 hours. So pretty darn fast, if you ask me. And that speed was between 1935 to 1958. There was a lot of competition on this line, and unfortunately, they didn't make it. One thing that was kind of unique is in the 1890s, they had completely covered vestibules. That's what these guys are right here. As you'll see, here's an original photo from the 1890s. It's pretty impressive. It's on the old photo plate. And you kind of see it's got that blue tint to the cars, because they actually were a royal blue car. They were high class. I mean, when I say high class, I'm talking like ridiculous levels of comfort and trimmings, mahogany, brass, silver. The fixtures were just amazing. It was basically a business car that was offered for everyone to ride on, and it was just immaculate. High speed, high quality. You got treated like royalty, kind of like the name implied. So, once we go look at the photo again, as you'll notice, this was pulled by a 440 American. They were also pulled by 460s as well during that time frame. If you look over here at this other photo, this is a preserved car, It wasn't actually on the Royal Blue line. It was for a different railroad, but it was historically mostly accurate. And that was the enclosed vestibules. And as you can see, these right here would have been brass trimmed and highly polished. I do believe I've seen some renditions of the steps being brass trimmed as well. It kind of varied depending on the manufacturer and the car. That being said, if we go back to this, the cars are pretty cool. The price is questionable at best. This is where the good looks great, looks amazing. I love the details. I love the whistle steam smoke effect. I love the interior lighting, the high details of the cars. They're plastic, but they have a wood look to them. I wished Lionel would actually make like a wooden looking car, or actual wooden car. These cars are funny because they have an 042 minimum curve, while your locomotive has an 031 minimum curve. I'm assuming, hypothetically, you could probably get these around an 036 on the curve for the passenger cars. It may not go well. I don't know. I can't tell you. But here's where the crux is. The locomotive is $800. These passenger cars are $500 for two for each set. So if you want the locomotive and passenger cars, you're looking at something like $2,800. It's a lot of money because you got $1,500. Oh, sorry, it's not $2,800. It'd be like $2,300 for all four of these things: the three car sets and the locomotive itself. I would have suggested Lionel do a bundle deal. Like, if you want to buy the locomotive, yeah. If you want to buy the cars, yeah. But then they should have had somewhere like packaged or bundled or the complete set. It would be like $200 or $300 less, or even $300 or $400 less than having to buy all this stuff individually. And they could have, because it's all built to order. Then they could have had oh hey, you want the locomotive and all the cars? Yeah, okay, great. We'll save you $200 or $300 because I know that there's profit in margins. The more you make, the more your profit goes up because you're making X number of thousands, and your number per widget goes down. You make them in the thousands versus in the hundreds. But that's kind of the bad right there. Next up, we're going to have the beautiful 442 Hiawatha class trains and locomotives. So, it was the 442 Atlantics, built for the Milwaukee Road, known as the Hiawatha. Funny story is, Hiawatha was actually a Indian tribe name of a leader. That was great. I'm not going to go over that story because it has a lot of stuff that YouTube might deem as risque and questionable. Let's just say people eating people is probably not a subject anybody wants to talk about, and so we're just going to leave it at that. So, that being said, the Hiawatha class style locomotive was built as a 442 Atlantic style Streamlined. So, 1935 was the first two locomotives, 1936 was another one, and then the fourth and final is 1937 for the Hiawatha 442s. When they were built, they had 13,000 gallon tenders for water, 4,000 gallons of fuel oil, and weighed, between tender and locomotive, 505,620 pounds. And they had a tractive effort of 30,685 pounds. Like I said, they were known as the Class A locomotives. So, beautiful looking locomotives, highly streamlined. They were actually built as a competition to fight the CB&Q, who started running from their destination, which is Chicago, to the Twin Cities of St. Paul, Minneapolis. And they are also fighting against the C&W as well, who was also running in 1935. So, some fun facts. The first train that left was in May 29th, 1935, leaving Chicago, heading to St. Paul. These trains operated the 421-mile stretch, and they did it in 6.25 hours. They were all streamlined, and they were running from 1935 to 1951. The locomotives ran that time frame. The actual route from Chicago to St. Paul's was run up until the era of Amtrak, and the last Milwaukee road train that was under the Hiawatha flag between Chicago and St. Paul ended April 30th, 1971. At the peak of the Hiawatha Railroad, you had two trains, one in the morning, the Hiawatha Morning, and one in the afternoon, the Hiawatha Afternoon Train. It was a pretty successful route, but it wasn't too bad. They were also competing for passenger service. At some point in my history and researching, I found that they did run from Chicago all the way over to Seattle, Washington area, but that was actually a separate train. I was hoping that this was part of the, hey, we'll bring these Hiawatha locomotives up to and through the Hiawatha Trail, which is over there in Montana and Idaho and stuff of that nature. Unfortunately, those trains never got beyond Chicago and St. Paul, from what I could gather. The cool thing is, I found out that they did make 4, and Lionel does show 4 Hiawathas. There are 2 different types of paint schemes for the cars, and 2 different kinds of paint schemes for the locomotives themselves. So, one thing to note is that the numbers for the locomotives are number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I could not verify one way or the other. The photos that I've seen show them as 1, 2, 3, and 4, but the documentation said that they were actually technically a different road number all the time, but they only show the number 4 on the sides of the locomotive, so I don't know. It might have just been that the way they were doing it was the train numbers that they were running to and from on the route. Now, these locomotives were fast little buggers. As a matter of fact, when they put a specialty car, which was a car that told them how fast they were doing 112 miles per hour with a top speed on a 14-mile-an-hour stretch, and that was done by engine number 2, which in the next page you'll be able to see. So if you want the locomotive that earned the top speed of 112.5 on the dyno car, you can definitely get it. These trains were expected to carry 9 cars at speeds of 100 or more miles per hour. Well, I think 112 miles an hour in a 14-mile stretch is a pretty good indication of how fast these guys are. Now, brace for impact, ladies and gentlemen, because the locomotive is $1,200. The set of 3 aluminum cars, which are 18 inches, is $900. And last but not least, if you want that beautiful 4-pack aluminum cars, yeah, you're going to be laying down $1,400. So you're paying more money for the cars than you are for the locomotive on that 4-pack. Can you say, ouch? Because that's what it sounds like to me. Ouch. Honestly, if I was Lionel, again, this is where I say this is the bad part. They kind of screwed the pooch. I think they should have put this as a package deal. Hey, buy the number 4 with these passenger cars. Buy it as a bundle set. Get 7 cars and a locomotive. And make it like $500 less than buying these all individually. Leave them individually. Say, hey, if you want to buy the Hiawatha number 4 and a passenger set individually, yeah, make them individual priced. But then have it to where me, as the consumer, has the opportunity to save $300 or $400 and buy the whole darn kit and caboodle. Again, these are all built to order, so volume. It makes a major difference. Alright, so now that I'm off that soapbox, they are aluminum cars. So they have an 054 radius, as the locomotive does. They are 18 inches. I'm not sure if that's end-to-end or coupler-to-coupler. I'm hoping it's end-to-end and not coupler-to-coupler, because then they'd cheat you out of an extra quarter-inch or so, or something like that. Now on the 4-pack, you actually do get a car that has an air horn and rail sounds. So I understand why it would be a little bit more expensive, but I mean, if these cars are going for $900, that means they're selling these cars for $300 a car, and they're selling these for $300 a car, and then one that car they're selling for $400. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Another one they're selling for $500 because you got 3 cars. It's 12. Sorry, 3 times 4 is 12. That's $1,200. but they're selling it for 14. So yeah, they've got a high price on one of those cars, and I kind of feel like they're missing the boat here. I mean, I love that they've got those cool accessories. I love that they have different things with the rail sounds and all that, but Lionel, I mean, if I was made out of money, I'd totally buy this. But, like, this set right here is going to set you back something like $3,000? That's $3,200. That's a lot of money. I mean, hell's bells for their super set with the triplex locomotive and 12 cars with the Vision Line caboose and a Vision Line stock car. Hello, that's $4,000. You're approaching $4,000 on this set right here, and you get a locomotive that's great, but not as many bells, whistles, and features as the Vision Line triplex. And yes, the passenger cars are cool. They make sounds on one of them. They don't have 2 car sets that make sounds and do things. And this is where I feel like it's like, is it worth it to spend this money on these kind of cars and these kind of things? So we're going to go ahead and check out the beautiful Hiawatha number 3 here. Now, that being said, if we look at it, it's got the Indian on the side of it. And we're going back to here, and it has it here. So, yeah, they got that right. And if we go back to that same photo, you see it's got that red stripe. And there we go, red stripe. And bada bing, bada boom, you've got 1, 2, and 4. Number 3 was the 2024 specialty locomotive, which I guess is kind of cool. Me personally, I would have preferred the Lionel locomotive be something different, and they use that number 3, so you could have had 1, 2, and 3 for the Hiawatha class locomotives. But hey, you know, I mean, each to their own. Gotta do what you gotta do. But now, if you'll notice, these passenger car sets here are different names, different schemes, same prices. So if you want another different type of passenger set for the different era, because one was for like one era, one's kind of for the other era. Which, by the way, if you look at this photo here, here's that kind of paint scheme that they're talking about right here. Got that beautiful red stripe up there and yellow everywhere else. So like I said, there we go. You've got the different tenders, you've got the different paint schemes. Oh, and if we go back and look at that photo, you'll see that that tender is blatantly bare. So they've got those different types of paint schemes modeled, and it's really cool. But there again, it's kind of where I'm going on the oscillating side of going. Beautiful cars, beautiful locomotives. The price is just, it's painfully expensive for that. Now, we're moving on to the beautiful rivalry that would be the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. So, the engine and the colors are fairly accurate from what I've seen. It looks like the locomotive is black-ish, maybe greenish. It's kind of hard to tell in the photo. So as you can kind of see, that's the locomotive. It looks kind of blackish, and it's got the yellow stripes for sure. It's just a little bit on the hard side to tell exactly what color the paint is, but it looks like it's black or a really, really dark green. I didn't have a whole lot of success finding the exact color of the passenger cars. I'll show you that here in a minute. So the story behind this was the 400 series locomotive didn't run underneath these 442s. They were mostly pulled by the 464 type locomotives during this era. It started January 2nd, 1935, and they ran service until the end of July 23rd, 1963. They gave up. They said, screw it, Milwaukee roads got this. We just can't compete. And so the Chicago Northwestern ditched that line of service. Now, the railroad called it the 400 miles and 400 minutes. That's probably why they've got the 400 number on the locomotive as a tribute to going, hey, 400 miles, 400 minutes. The reality was, it was about 412, 408 miles, and they did it in about 420 minutes. It was actually like 6.5 to 6 3/4 hours. So, Great locomotives. They were competitive against the CB&Q. That was running the route that started in 1934. So the CB&Q, which is the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, said, hey, we're running from Chicago to St. Paul. So the C&W and started doing that right away. And then a few months later, the Milwaukee Road did the same darn thing. So yeah, at one point in time, you had 3 different railroads running 3 different routes servicing the St. Paul, Minneapolis to Chicago, Illinois area. Talk about some competition right there. Was pretty steep, I imagine. As we'll look at this beautiful photo right here, this was the diesel era. I couldn't find a color photo of the steam era with these passenger cars on this paint scheme here. So it does have a greenish top and a silver roof. So I don't know if that was just only during the diesel era or if it was also during the steam era of how the painting was done. Just like the other Hiawatha class locomotives and rolling stock, same prices all the way around. They're all built to order. They do have that whistle steam smoke effect. So they're beautiful. They're all 054s. You got the 4 packs got the clickety clack and the air horn sounds with the rolling sounds. So it's, once again, it's still good. I did like that Lionel did include that little bit of detail on the locomotive's paint scheme there with the little yellow stripes. As the locomotive we'll see up here does that as well. Right over here, you'll see that right there. You got that little striping. So that's cool. Moving on, we have the Seaboard Railroad. This was a Seaboard Airline Railroad. They actually never owned a 442 for what I could find, and the 850 never had one. They never had any locomotive numbered 850 during their steam era. They did run for a long time. The locomotive, which I will show you guys right now, did have a green paint scheme, it looks like, with the yellow striping and red striping. That being said, I personally had a hard time finding anything in the steam era of their Streamlined locomotives. Any semblance of this paint scheme, that was the closest one that I could find, which is unfortunate. As far as the passenger cars, the best that I could find were the more modern silver Streamliner cars. I could not find a whole lot indicating any other color paint scheme that they had for them. So that's kind of one of those. I'm not sure if it's out there. If you guys can find photos, I'd be more than happy to see them and, you know, eat my words at this point. But the Seaboard was called the Seaboard Airline Railroad. Now, the airline terminology came around in the late 1850s, 1853, 1854, and it was because the routes were mostly straight and, in some cases, had few curves and were near the shorelines. But, in this case, the Seaboard actually did run on the shoreline side. It was a conglomeration of 19 different railroads totaling 2,600 miles that formed in April 1900. It ran on the east side of the United States, from the coastal regions of Florida up into New York area. So from New York all the way to Florida and all the way to Louisiana on the Gulf Coast. It kind of made that nice little L shape with the division going down into Florida. These locomotives, when they did run any kind of passenger service of any speed, they ran them on a 462 engine, more than likely for their Streamlined. As we saw in the photo there, it's that Streamlined locomotive with the 462. So, once again, I get what Lionel's doing. They're trying to hedge their bets and make a bunch of the same locomotives so they can save their costs. Again, we'll go back. Same issue with pricing. I'm not happy about it. Can't do a whole lot about it, unfortunately. But the Seaboard Railroad conglomeration became part of CSX in 1987, officially. They were technically part of CSX and I think Conrail a little bit before that, but they ran under their own name and their own technical corporation. But by 1987, they completely folded up shop, dumped the LLC, and made it 100% CSX. As a matter of fact, CSX still runs some of the original Seaboard railroads. Now, moving on to the hot dog paint scheme. I'm sorry. I didn't realize this was actually a real paint scheme. It's called the UP 49er Streamlined paint scheme. I did not know this existed. As a matter of fact, if you go and look at this photo here, it is a real-life photo that was taken in the 1940s. It's crazy. It blows my mind to this very day to think that the Union Pacific had this paint scheme, because I'm so used to their beautiful yellow with the American flag. In 1930s, late 1930s, we're talking 1939, 1938, UP saw that their passenger service had been slumping, so they decided to do the 49er Streamliner. And they mostly ran 482 big steam locomotives. They were going 48.75 hours from Chicago to San Francisco, and that was a run of about 1,400 miles. Now, I was reading somewhere that supposedly it was 50 miles for 2,200 miles, and I think that was round trip from San Francisco to Chicago. I don't know if I'm believing that or not, because those numbers would be very impressive in order to pound down over 2,500 miles in 50 hours. I think it was 50 hours one way. Don't know. I can't swear to it because the documentation's a little bit fuzzy out there for me. So the 7800s, sorry, the 2800s never really existed on the 442s or the 482s. I did find that the 2800 did exist as a 462, and that was in the pre-1920 era. The locomotives that I looked at were the P1s to P6s with the superheating steam when they were upgraded. As far as that documentation was telling me, they don't ever appear to have been streamlined. So the only ones that were streamlined were their 482s. And unfortunately, the service ended in like 1942, 1941. They gave up pretty early on. I have a suspicion a lot of that came down to World War II opening up and the United States going, hey, passenger services, great, love them. We're going to turn all your stuff into troop transports and military trains. So, yeah, I'm assuming that's kind of what happened there. Here's another cool photo of this locomotive. I love the the way it looks. It's just kind of one of those weird things. I wish that that Lionel would have moved the light down. Because if you'll notice in this other photo as well, the headlight is in the center of the locomotive, whereas they ripped off the Hiawatha 442 and they never decided to move the headlight down. And I understand from a casting standpoint, but I wish that they would be able to put the locomotive headlight, or at least put some kind of like a logo or a fake light there, or a sticker of a light to kind of like, oh, hey, you know, this is where a light would have been as well, but they didn't, so it is what it is. Now, all of that being said, we have completed our run of the 442s and the Streamlined locomotives. These were big speed, big luxury, pulled by moderate locomotives at high speeds. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to like, subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and make sure to follow me and come back for part number 4, where we're going to be talking about some big heavyweight diesels and the features that we can see in the future. Thank you guys. Stay safe on the rails.